All right, let's dive right into this explainer and explore the complete, honestly fascinating story of how Pakistan was created. We're going to unpack a massive geopolitical shift that literally redrew the map of South Asia forever. Every nation has an origin story, but Pakistan's emergence from the shadow of the British Empire to an independent state, it involves decades of intense political struggle, really complex constitutional negotiations, and ultimately a profound human toll. So let's get right to it.
To wrap our heads around this massive history, we're going to hit 5 key milestones today: shadows of an empire, the Muslim awakening, the Pakistan movement, the painful partition, and finally, forging a republic. Starting with Section 1, Shadows of an Empire. Let's set the stage and look at the historical baseline before Pakistan was even on a map.
Let's put this into perspective. We're talking deep roots here, going all the way back to the Indus Valley Civilization in 3300 BCE, literally one of humanity's earliest advanced societies. Fast forward to 711 CE and Islam first arrives in Sindh, kicking off centuries of cultural shifts. But the modern catalyst? That happens much later. In the 1800s, the British East India Company gradually took control, which sparked a massive uprising in 1857. After suppressing that rebellion, the British Crown stepped in and took direct control in 1858, and that officially began the British Raj. The key takeaways here is that distinct religious and cultural identities have been forming for centuries, well before the British even arrived. Moving to milestone 2, the Muslim awakening. Following that 1857 revolt, the political landscape was completely transformed. Okay, so in the decades following that uprising, political awareness really started to boom. In 1906, the All India Muslim League was formed to protect the rights of Muslims, who were, of course, a numerical minority in British India. And this led to a real game changer in 1909, separate electorates. Under this British reform, Muslim voters specifically elected Muslim representatives. Supporters saw this as absolutely crucial for protecting minority rights, while critics argued it just deepened divisions. But no matter how you look at it, this became a highly debated feature that shaped basically all future politics in the region. Then, in 1930, we get this real light bulb moment. Philosopher and poet Allama Muhammad Iqbal proposed a radical idea, bringing together Muslim-majority provinces in northwestern India within a political framework. Now, historians still debate whether he meant a totally independent state or just an autonomous unit, but Iqbal absolutely provided the intellectual foundation for what would become the demand for a separate nation. He really hit the nail on the head by articulating that Muslims had their own very distinct cultural identity. So, picture a serious political deadlock in the 1920s and 30s. On one side, you've got the Indian National Congress pushing for a united India with a strong central government. But on the flip side, the Muslim League is demanding specific constitutional safeguards to protect Muslim political and cultural interests. It was like a giant puzzle where the pieces just weren't fitting together anymore, and these competing visions became incredibly difficult to reconcile.
Which brings us to part 3, the Pakistan movement. This is where intellectual debates turn into a full-blown, highly organized movement.
By the late 30s, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, a brilliant lawyer who was actually once known as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, had stepped up as the undisputed leader of the Muslim League. Driven by his calm, laser-focused leadership, the League held a massive session in Lahore. On March 23, 1940, they adopted the Lahore Resolution. This historic document called for independent states in the Muslim-majority regions. Interestingly, the word Pakistan wasn't even in the original text, but it quickly became known as the Pakistan Resolution, and this marked the undeniable beginning of the demand for independence. Talk about a pressure cooker. The 1940s were intense. First, World War II breaks out, and Britain just starts using Indian resources without even consulting local leaders. Massive outrage, right? By 1945, Britain is financially drained and realizes they have to leave. They try to set up an interim government at the Simla Conference, but it completely falls apart. So they hold these make-or-break elections. The results? Congress won the general seats, but the Muslim League overwhelmingly swept the seats reserved for Muslims. This proved, for sure, that the League was the principal voice for Muslims across British India. What happens next is basically a domino effect of failed negotiations and rising tensions that made partition the only viable path. First, a final attempt at a united federal solution, the Cabinet Mission Plan, totally collapses. Then, the last viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, steps in and realizes a negotiated partition is literally the only practical way out. Finally, on June 3, 1947, the Mountbatten Plan is announced, officially declaring that British India is going to be divided. And this is a really crucial point. Independence was ultimately a legal, constitutional achievement. The UK Parliament passed the Indian Independence Act of 1947, which officially ended the Raj and transferred sovereignty to the newly independent dominions of Pakistan and India. It wasn't some military surrender. It was a constitutional transfer of power born from decades of intense debate. Section 4. The Painful Partition. On August 14, 1947, Pakistan is officially born, but it came with a staggering human cost. 1,600. Just think about that number for a second. That is the number of kilometers, roughly 1,000 miles, separating the newly formed West Pakistan and East Pakistan. It's a massive geographical anomaly right out of the gate. Pakistan was born as the world's largest Muslim-majority country, but its two halves were separated by a massive expanse of India. This number alone really highlights the sheer logistical nightmare the new nation faced from day one. And get this, the challenges didn't stop with geography. Drawing the new borders was incredibly rushed. A British lawyer, Sir Cyril Radcliffe, who had literally never even been to India, was given just a few weeks to divide Punjab and Bengal. The result was the Radcliffe Award, and tragically, it drew lines right through villages, railways, and even people's homes. When Independence Day actually hit, many families had no idea which country they were even standing in. Just total chaos on the ground. We really have to pause and reflect here, because this chaotic border drawing triggered arguably the most painful mass migration in recorded human history. Millions of Muslims moved to Pakistan, while Hindus and Sikhs moved to India. People left behind ancestral homes and businesses their families had owned for generations. Temporary refugee camps were completely overwhelmed. And tragically, this period saw horrific communal violence and a massive loss of life. It's a deeply painful chapter that's forever tied to the joy of their independence.
Finally, Section 5, Forging a Republic. Because winning independence, that was just step one. Now they had to build a state.
Imagine having to split up an entire empire's assets overnight. That was the daunting task of state building. Everything from the old British Raj had to be divided. Military equipment, financial reserves, civil servants, you name it. But it wasn't a 50-50 split. Pakistan inherited a much smaller slice of the industrial pie since most major factories stayed in Indian territory. They had to organize ministries, print currency, and build an army basically from scratch with super limited resources. And then tragedy strikes. Barely 13 months after independence, on September 11, 1948, Governor-General Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the Quaid-e-Azam, or Great Leader, passes away. This created an absolute leadership vacuum at the worst possible time. But despite this devastating loss, the nation's civil institutions just had to roll up their sleeves and push forward with building the country. So what followed was this incredibly rocky, persistent journey to establish the rule of law. It's a roller coaster of democratic periods and military rule. It kicks off with the 1949 Objectives Resolution, laying down democratic and Islamic principles. That leads to the 1956 Constitution, officially making Pakistan an Islamic republic. Then a pivot to a presidential system in 1962 under military rule, before finally landing on the 1973 Constitution, which restored a parliamentary system and remains the bedrock of their law today. But right in the middle of that journey, things hit a breaking point. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a breaking point, it was a profound historical rupture. By the late 60s, tensions over power sharing between West and East Pakistan boiled over. Following the 1970 elections, a deep political crisis turned into an armed conflict. India intervened militarily, and on December 16, 1971, East Pakistan broke away to become the independent nation of Bangladesh. It was a deeply painful event that completely reshaped Pakistan's political map. Fast forward to today. Despite decades of immense challenges, including the ongoing and complex Kashmir dispute, Pakistan stands out as a dynamic nation of over 240 million people. It's sitting at a super strategic global crossroads, it's got rich agriculture, a booming tech sector, and yes, it's a recognized nuclear power. Of course, they are tackling serious modern hurdles, especially with the economy and climate change, as they continue to build their future. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. How does a nation born from such monumental struggle, complex negotiations, and painful divisions continue to evolve its identity and democratic institutions today? The story of Pakistan isn't just a chapter in a history book. It's a living, breathing process of nation building happening right now. It's amazing how much the shadows of the past shape the present, isn't it? Thanks for exploring this with me. Keep asking questions and keep learning.